Hello guys, a warm welcome to this session on GMAT Score Booster, GMAT Score Improvement Masterclass. Today is going to be a very interesting and a very different session where we are going to cover some really incredible journeys of some students, some case studies that are kind of unbelievable to many people in some cases. But these are stories which will inspire you, motivate you to give your best and actually achieve what many people think is impossible to achieve on the GMAT. So I'm very, very excited about this session. And think of it, this session as something different because generally what we do is we do strategy related sessions where we talk about what should be your strategy to improve your score in GMAT, like how should you go about improving the score, understanding your gaps and all of that. So that's the general sessions that we do, which is a lot about strategy focus. So this time what we thought was that instead of just taking up strategy focused sessions, we will actually take up some case studies, real life case studies of people who had actually had some issues with their GMAT preparation and how did these people actually go about working on their GMAT preparation and how did they improve their score to achieve their dream score overall. So we'll take up three very unique case studies. So again, if any of one of you wants to attend the strategy session as well, like how to go about your prep from scratch, what are the different steps that you need to improve, you can watch out the episode 1 for this strategy session, basically, which I've just shared in the comments. It's not like you must need to watch it only, then you'll be able to make sense out of this session. These are two completely different sessions, independent. You can still learn from today's session as well. But if you're looking for strategic advice, the link is there with you. You can actually go through that. So what I've done today is I've called upon a senior most verbal expert. I would like to call her, in a way, a magician because she has kind of turned around so many use cases, so many amazing stories she has delivered over the years. And it was very difficult for us to pick those three cases. Like, I think, ma'am, we discussed for about an hour to kind of identify which three we will discuss in the session
Yes,
today.
we did that. That who should we pick and who should we leave out? They were such amazing
Exactly.
journeys, all of them.
Amazing journeys of so much effort by these people. But I feel that it's equally important to have the right guru in place. And I feel Sunita ma'am has actually been a magician in this people's life to turn this around. So this session is going to be mainly hosted by ma'am herself. I'm going to be a co-host, or think of it this way, that I'm going to be an interviewer who is basically here to kind of learn how did ma'am turn around these use cases overall and help them get to success. So what are these use cases that we are talking about? Very, very quickly. First, we'll do a quick intro about this as well. Like we are already in the intro part. Then we'll take up the first case study, which was Rishabh. Like this guy had a 670 on the GMAT and he had studied for about, I would say, 5 months by that time. When he scored that 670, and he had a very, very hectic work schedule. He used to have 60-hour work weeks. He was working in private equity. You can understand the kind of work life that he had at that point of time. And even after that, like he used to study and was stuck at a 670. And he came to us with a tight deadline of about 30 days or so. And the good thing is we were able to turn around his case in 20 days and we were able to get him to a 740 on GMAT, which helped him get into INSEAD, Kellogg, and a lot of other schools. He has joined INSEAD already for this fall intake. So he's studying in his dream school. At that point of time, it was basically it was like an unachievable thing. Sometimes when you see someone at a 670 and they want to get into INSEAD in the very next round, but yeah, he was able to turn this around. Then the second story, and this one again, some people might not think 720 is an amazing score, but honestly, this girl Nandini had taken 7 attempts on the GMAT when we had a discussion with her, and in those 7 attempts, she had spent 2.5 years, pretty much studied every single thing. Like before the session, I was asking ma'am, do you remember like which courses had she used? And she was
Almost,
like,
almost everything.
almost everything that you can think of. 7 attempts. Like we are laughing at it right now because she was able to go across the 700 barrier in the eighth
And
attempt.
and
But
she was so anxious, so
so
anxious.
anxious. Yes, and it does happen with you when you have 7 failed attempts, and she was not able to cross a 700. In fact, her highest score in those 7 attempts was a 680. That happened once, and her score was plateauing around 640, 650. She used to spend so much time on the prep, and still she was not able to improve. And in the eighth and final attempt, just one more attempt, she was able to cross that mark and then got to a 720. So happy to see, Gaijin, that You mentioned 720 is a great score. I just said 720 is, to many people, not a great score. Some people think it's just 760, 770 is that work. But trust me, we have had students who have converted top five schools in the world with sub 700 scores also. So trust me, it's very very different. And Gaijin, you can probably relate to it. Gaijin says I have a six failed attempts here, best score of 670. So you can probably relate with Nandini. And then we had another case study like this, Vasu, another of a student who had seven attempts on GMAT with a quant 46 as the highest score that he kind of had in those seven attempts. And we were able to get him to a quant 15, the eighth and the final attempt. So we were thinking which one to take up, like Vasu or Nandini. So we kind of did a more biased work on the verbal front. We thought that let's have this session around verbal, and we can have another episode on specifically focused on quant. So the third case study was about Tushar. This guy came in with a 710 on GMAT and wanted to improve it to 750. Again, 710 to 750 is a whole different kind of a score improvement that we're talking about, because then you have a completely different set of challenges. So we're going to talk about all these three case studies, and I'll open it up for open-ended Q&A towards the end. Doesn't mean that you cannot ask your questions in between. Feel free to be the interviewer, ask Sunita ma'am yourself about the questions that you have about the students. If you are able to relate to any of the students, feel free to ask about your questions as well. Obviously, I will be the moderator. I will take up the questions as required, ma'am. So I'll throw those questions at you as and
Absolutely.
when we proceed. Okay, okay. Great. So overall, when it comes to score improvement, what is the general approach that we take at GMATWhiz, or that is something that we strongly believe in? Like it is always supposed to be data backed. It's always supposed to be structured. Like you cannot just go about randomly solving questions or practicing questions like and just to think that you're going to improve, because that proverb, probably practice makes a man perfect, has actually done more harm than good for GMAT students. So you think that, okay, it's practice that makes you perfect, but in reality, it has to be a proper structure. So when someone works with us at GMATWhiz or someone comes to me for advice, I always take it into these four steps. The first one is understanding their background in depth, like what all have they done. This kind of acts like a guiding light for us to kind of understand where they're going, what have they done, and considering the fact that we have already like spent about 30 years in the industry collectively as a team, we have understood and looked at all the different platforms available out there. So this helps us in understanding what is the student's current state of learning, what they know, what they probably don't know. But we don't just go by our prejudice by looking at their background. We go to the next step then, which is root cause analysis. We sit with them, look at their data, probably do some qualitative work as well, which is what we are going to talk about as well. So this is just an overview which I'm giving you to give you an idea how we are going to talk about all these three case studies overall. So when we do root cause analysis of the students, try to identify what is the main problem that they're facing. And then we create a plan of action for them. And then we move to the focused execution where we improve their plan of action as and when required. So I'm going to talk about all these three people. We're going to talk about all these four phases for them, what all we did, how did they work in that phase, these phases, and how did they grow overall in these phases. Okay. But just a quick intro about GMATWhiz. Those of you who are hearing about us for the very first time, we are world's only truly personalized course. We offer personalized learning to the team. Basically, you cannot get a more personalized offering than GMATWhiz in the world, because we offer personalization through technology as well as human intervention wherever required. So when you work with us, you get personalized study plan. Even with our online course, you get every single week you get a personalized study plan, which tells you exactly what you are supposed to do in every single week. And the course content is completely fine-tuned to your requirement. We give you the course content based on what you need. It contains real-time improvement, what is based on where you go wrong. It will automatically identify what you need to work on. So you're focusing your energy on what needs to be done, and you're not focusing your energy at all on something that you're already good at. And then you also get dedicated mentors with whom you can connect every 15 days to kind of see where you're headed, what is your current skill level, and how can you move forward from there. So again, Sunita ma'am generally doesn't take mentorship. She's our senior tutor. So the cases, examples that we're going to take today are going to be primarily of private tutoring. There is one case of Tushar, who was our online course student, who gets all these three services. He had his mentor as Shreyash, and then he took, I think, a couple of sessions with Sunita ma'am as well for private tutoring. So even if you take the online course, you get a mentor to kind of understand where you're going wrong and what or not. So this session, we are taking up three case studies which are focused majorly on private tutoring. One of them is a mix of basically both. All right. So because of these things, we have been GMAT Plus most effective course when it comes to average score improvement, and actually have a highest average score improvement among our competitors today. Okay. So with that, let's talk about basically Rishabh. So that was a quick intro about GMATWhiz. Let's talk about Rishabh. He achieved a feat of 670 to 740 in 20 days, converted INSEAD Kellogg, the best converts that he had basically, and he joined INSEAD, he joined INSEAD finally with this. Now, his roadmap again, very similar. We focused on these 4 steps. So let's get started with understanding the background. So this was back last year around October when this happened. So Rishabh was another student who was watching one of our webinars, just like this one that some of you are watching, Pratik, Akshay, Kejin. I just see 3 names here, but I'm sure a lot of you are watching this webinar. So I'm telling you this because he was just one among you, like one among you. And he was, at that point of time, he had actually did about 5 months of preparation on GMAT because he started early in June. Actually, he started in March, but then there was a break in between April and May, so I'm not considering that period. But he started seriously from June, where he was spending about 60 hours every single week on his work, not his preparation. On his work, he was spending 60 hours every single week. And along with that, he was finding out time for GMAT prep. So he had very little time for GMAT prep, but he still gave about 15-20 hours every single week for GMAT preparation from June. And he used eGMAT primarily for verbal, which is a very well-known course, and Magoosh for additional practice. And he gave his first attempt for GMAT in August end. So June till August, 3 months he prepared using this material, and he got a score of 670 with a verbal 33. Now, obviously, when you get a low score, you kind of then focus on working on your weaknesses and everything. So he also kind of thought about that. He spent 2 more months on practicing. And that's why I said that the proverb practice makes a man perfect has done more harm than good, because this guy spent 2 months on practicing till October end, and then again took a mock in October, and to his dismay, he sees his score as a 670 again in a mock test with a verbal 34. What was his quant score? I think, Siddhant, it was about a 48, 49. That's what I remember basically. I'll have to check his success story again to kind of recollect that. But his major area of improvement was basically verbal. So what you need to focus on is was after 2 months of practice also he was still at the same level, and that's what we call as a score plateau. He was not able to break that barrier, and his target was round 2 deadlines for INSEAD, which basically was in January 5th last year. He worked with us for GMAT as well as his application process as well, so that's why I recollect that. So he wanted to finish his GMAT by November so that he has the entire December to work on application. And if you're someone who wants to apply to INSEAD, you need to have at least a month with you because INSEAD has had 22 essays. 22 essays. So imagine that kind of effort that you have to put in on INSEAD application. So he planned that in advance. He knew that he had to take the GMAT in the next 30 days. But the good thing, the best thing probably about him was he came with an open mind. He was not like, okay, I just want to kind of get it done with only 30 days. He was like, Piyush, you know what, this is my goal. But if you tell me that, okay, I need to give another 10 days to it, I'm open to doing that. And that's probably one of the best things which I liked about him in the initial interaction that I had with him, because many people come to me and say, okay, Piyush, you know what, I want to achieve this in 15 days, 20 days, or 25 days, or 30 days. The problem is not you telling me that I want to achieve it in this time. The problem is to be realistic about it as well and to trust an expert when you're speaking to an expert. So we told him that okay, yes, we'll target for 30 days. Most likely we'll be able to achieve it in 30 days. And the good thing was he was able to take the test in 20 days instead of 30. So we recommended him to take it sooner because we felt he was ready. So that was very good thing about Rishabh that I like. And then we went to the next stage, which was root cause analysis. So after looking at all this, and ma'am, I'll pass it on to you from here because beyond this, it was all your magic. I was just aware about the background, and then I pass on the cases to ma'am. So I'll pass on the bait to you to kind of take it
So
forward.
thank you, Piyush, for that. Thank you so much. So let me just, I think my screen is sharing already, right? Okay. I just
Yes,
want to
please,
get
yes,
that
please.
fine. Yeah. Right. So when we talk about Rishabh's case and when I sat down with him, so of course as Piyush was saying, we always study the data that is in front of us, right? And the data said that okay, he had done well. His ESR showed that he had done pretty well in SC compared to CR and RC. But whenever we look at this kind of data, we don't assume that the data, whatever it is saying, is absolute. What do I mean by that? It means that he may have had a good day with SC, given that his CR and RC were pretty down in the dumps. There was reason to kind of suspect that SC score, that probably it may not be reflecting his actual ability or skill on SC. So that was the data part. And then what we did in the first session that I had with him was have him solve an SC question in front of me out aloud, so that I could literally look into his mind and see the steps he was taking, see the turns he was taking when going through those, the sentence and the options, and understand that what he was doing at the point when he joined us. And the qualitative data revealed a lot of very, very surprising things. Why it was very surprising, I'll tell you.
In fact, ma'am,
Surprising is,
just as ma'am was telling, like, so I
yeah,
just
yeah, please
like
go
to
ahead.
highlight one very important aspect. So many times when people come to me and like, the reason I'm interrupting here is
No,
because I
please go
speak
ahead.
to about five, six students, new students every single day. So I get to see very different viewpoints. So there are people who come to me and say, okay, Piyush, you know what? I'm actually very, very good at SC. I don't think I have any issues with it. I just need to work on my CR analysis skills. And especially when you see the data in front of you, you feel that that's the case. But in many cases, like if you look at as an expert, there are two broad reasons why you could probably do better in SC. One is that probably you know the grammar rules so well that you are able to apply those rules in easy and medium questions and get a high score. But if you do not apply or focus on the logic of the given sentence, then there is a very high chance that you might do well in SC, but you're not doing well in CR analysis just because you're not understanding the context, right? So that was just my understanding.
No, absolutely, you're right, Piyush, because I always think of it this way: perception versus reality. All right. So the student perceives this is what the data is saying, so I must be good. It's not actually like that. All right. And even with rules, you still need to know the logic behind the rules. Even if you want your concepts to work, you should know why that concept is the way it is. All right. If you don't know that, if you're blindly applying the concepts, it won't work. At least for GMAT, it won't work because GMAT grammar is also very, very meaning driven. Very meaning driven. Right. So we were talking. So let's, Piyush, in fact, let's get the students to solve the question that I actually had Rishabh solve in front of me. I think that is going to give them a better picture of how we go about this qualitative analysis. I think that's
Yes,
what
so
we'll
we
do.
always do this qualitative analysis because data is telling us one thing, but we always want to validate whether that is the real story with him. And generally, when we do that, what we do is we ask students to solve the questions out loud in front of us. So we're going to do that for you with you as well. But before going into that, we want you to probably take a shot at this question. So ma'am
Shall
is
I
going to
share
share
it,
that
Piyush?
question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Here's
yeah,
the
yeah.
question
Let's
for
do
you
that.
guys. Here's the
Yeah.
question, guys. Give it your best shot. And we should give them a time limit or something.
Yeah, I think we should give them 2 minutes. I think should be sufficient. 2.5 minutes is what we are
Absolutely.
going to give you, and we are going to mute ourselves so that you are able to focus on solving the question. And Akshit, I'm going to give you another webinar link for how to start a GMAT prep as well. So stay tuned for that, and you guys can start solving the question. Now I'm going to go on mute. All the best. And one more thing, please don't start posting your answers in the comments. Please hold on to your answers. We'll ask you when to post the answers, then only post the answers. Okay? Thank you. Yes, Siddhant, you can now probably start posting the answers. I've already given more than 2 minutes for this question, so please start posting your answers now. All right, I see some comments coming in. Nitish says it's E. Siddhant says it's E. Toyesh says it's E. Harshit, Shiv. Most of you are going for choice E. Piyush, same name. Piyush goes for choice C. Okay. What about others? I see about 30 plus people live in the session. I just see what 6 responses. What about others? Have you solved this? And don't worry about it, you getting it right or wrong. It's all okay till you're putting in the effort. That's the main idea. And just to tell you, Rishabh also got this question wrong when he was solving it. But Abhay says it's A. Okay. What about others, guys? And again, this is a 700 level question, guys. Let me tell you that as well. This is a 700 level question, and if you go by the data, basically on this one, we'll actually understand like how this is unique. Because if you look at the GMAT club attempt data, 36% of the people think C is the correct answer, and 12% people think A is the correct answer. The correct answer is choice. That's something different altogether. But that's what the case is. But the reason I asked you to solve this question was just to kind of give you an idea about this question so that you can familiarize with it. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the exact video clip of Rishabh solving this question for the very first time in the qualitative feedback session that he was having with ma'am, like the first session ever that he had with ma'am. So we generally do this as a diagnosis session, the very first session when someone takes up our private tutoring course. And there we try to see how students are solving the question so that we get to see their approach. Because what we have seen in the past is when it comes to retakers who have taken multiple attempts on GMAT, they do a lot of hard work, they do a lot of practice, but they focus more on conceptual weaknesses or topic specific weaknesses or just solving more questions without realizing that probably the method that they are using itself is flawed. The problem is if your method itself is flawed, even if you put an extra effort to do more practice or do work on the concepts, you will still only get better at using the wrong method. So it's very important for you to use the right method in order for you to get the right score. So what we do in our sessions is we try to see how students solve questions, and in order to do that, we ask them to solve the questions out loud in front of us. And when they are doing the questions out loud, our experts look at their approach, try to see where they are going wrong, how is that they are processing that information, what is that they are doing exactly, and then we are able to pinpoint and tell that exactly this is where you're going wrong. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a short 3-minute clip of Rishabh solving this question for the very first time, and he's speaking his mind out loud. And then we will show you what is that we inferred from it and what is the feedback that we gave him and how we planned his entire journey from there on, basically. So be with me on this video. I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna run it for you, and you're gonna now, you should be able to hear the audio now. So I'm going to run it again. Okay, so Rishabh is trying to read his mind out loud. He's solving this question for the very first time. He's just reading it out loud. The volume of this part of the audio is slightly low, but he's just reading it in one single go. So focus on that. So at this point, Rishabh has spent some time reading the question. He has focused on rereading certain part of the question, but he's still seeming a little confused about what is right, what is not. Basically, let's see what he does further from here. Now you were saying something? So he was also confused between choice A and choice C, because which is a case with many people. They are able to bring down to last two choices, and then they are really confused about that. Okay, so this was the exact clip of how Rishabh sounded. The reason why I wanted you guys to have a look at it is just to help you understand and relate that he was not a Superman. He was also in a similar situation as you. Now, let me ask you guys, like, how many of you solved the question in a similar way as Rishabh did? I would like to just have a quick yes no in the chat, basically over here. If you followed a similar approach as Rishabh did, read the sentence once, you had to reread the sentence, certain parts of it, you did not feel anything was wrong with choice A or the initial sentence, and that's how you went about the option choices. You followed a similar approach as Rishabh. How many of you did that? A quick yes no will help, basically. Just want to see that overall. And in the meantime, you guys post your yes and no's. What we're gonna do is, after generally when we do this, when we ask the students to solve a question, then we ask the student to basically to present their analysis. But after that, our expert Sunita ma'am basically sits with them, kind of solve the question right in front of them, helps them understand where they went wrong with the way they actually went about reading the sentence, where they went wrong with the way they were solving the question. Okay, so now I'll pass on the discussion to ma'am. So ma'am will solve this question right in front of you. She will show you what is the right method. She will help you understand what is the right method, and then you can relate, compare it with your method that you followed, and see whether the method that you followed was the apt one or not. Okay, so over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Piyush. So, guys, I'm just going to straight away go into it. I'm going to show you how this or any sentence correction question should be solved by using the meaning-based approach. A lot of people in the industry talk about meaning-based approach, using the meaning and so on and so forth. But exactly how to go about it is something that nobody really shows, and students don't really follow it. Okay, so our approach is based on reading the original sentence in a certain manner, okay, so that you get the intended meaning even before you move down to the answer choice elimination stage. And I'm going to show you exactly how we read that sentence. Okay, so if a student before coming to this stage would already know that where the person has to stop and break the sentence and read. Bottom line, we tell the student, don't read the entire sentence in one single flow. If you really think about it, understanding the meaning of 30-35 words in one single flow, it's not really possible, and there could be a lot of twists and turns that you're not aware of. All right, so we always advise you to break and read, and here's how. A substance, and like there's a very quick pause in my mind that, okay, we're talking about a substance. derived from the Madagascar periwinkle, and that word derived looks like a verb, but may not be a verb. Sorry, guys. And therefore, I kind of stop there and we ask ourselves, okay, is that a verb or is that a verbal? All right. Derived. Did the substance derive anything? No. So the substance itself was derived from something called the Madagascar periwinkle. In short, I would tell myself, okay, here I have a modified entity. Okay, that is the substance. I have a modifier modifying it. And literally speaking, the meaning is we've got the substance made from something called the Madagascar periwinkle. Okay, which has proved useful. All right. So in my mind, I'm thinking, all right, this which, what is it referring to? We have to decide that. However, something has proved useful in reducing the death rate among these young patients. All right. So this whole thing here is then again a modified entity and modifier pair. Now, what is the modified entity? What is it modifying? I have two available, nouns. One, the nearest, which is the Madagascar periwinkle. The other noun is the head noun, that is the substance. And I'm like thinking, okay, is it the substance that has proved useful, or is it this Madagascar periwinkle which has proved useful? And I'm raising a red flag here. Okay, logically, it seems to make more sense to believe that it's the substance that has proved useful. Otherwise, why even mention the substance? All right. But I'm still curious here because this is not so clear to me and ambiguous. So at GMATWhiz, we always say that ambiguity is one of the reasons to eliminate a choice. So here I'm like putting that away. I still have to decide whether it's the substance or it's the Madagascar periwinkle. Likely this one, but let's see. Is cultivated in China. Okay, I stop here and I don't need any rocket science to tell me this is a verb. I've already got the is here. I do need to ask what is my subject, because there seems to be a lot of modifiers in between. And clearly it has to be the substance, because in between I've just got modifiers. So a substance is cultivated in China as part of a program. Now at GMATWhiz, we have this golden rule framework where we ask you to kind of understand three things about a subject verb pair. One, do you have a proper subject verb pair? Does it agree in number? Okay, it does. Substance is singular, is cultivated as singular, fine. The third thing which we ask students to do, and which normally students don't, is think about the logical match with the subject. So is it logical to say that a substance which is made from some other source is then cultivated? I mean, I'm confused. Is it derived or is it cultivated? Is the process of production derivation or the process of production cultivation? Clearly, this is a red flag for me, another red flag here. Okay. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, it seems as if the Madagascar periwinkle has probably been cultivated, or the substance doesn't sound logical. Let me read ahead. So either of these two is cultivated in China as part of a program, and the program is to integrate traditional herbal medicine. Okay, so some sort of herb is probably cultivated, and the substance doesn't look like to be a herb. It is something that is derived. All right, so my intended meaning here seems to be the Madagascar periwinkle is cultivated in China, okay, and as part of a certain program, and then a substance is derived from this Madagascar periwinkle, and most likely it's the substance which has proved useful. So with that, when you go into answer choice analysis, it's just a matter of a few seconds. Like, you spend a minute on analyzing the original sentence, you hardly take 20-25 seconds to go through the options to tell you, oh no, all of them are illogical. Okay, and you arrive at the correct answer. Until and unless you raise these questions, you are not going to be able to get logical answers to them. And if you're just trying to look at, okay, the which is referring to one noun, haha, that's fine, and I have got a subject verb, that's fine. You are assuming the subject verb is logical, but you can see from this question that subject verb logical match is something which is very, very commonly tested at GMAT. And if you're not asking those questions, you're not going to spot the errors. So a lot of you seem to have got this right, but the point is, did you get it right by the right method or not? All right. And when you've already seen the clip that Rishabh, the clip on Rishabh, and you realize that his way of solving led to certain outcomes, certain things that I could qualitatively understand about his methodology. All right. He was solving more by instinct, what sounded right, than really following on the meaning of the sentence, and which is why he landed with the wrong choice. In fact, it was surprising in Rishabh's case because he'd been through a very extensive course like EGMAT, which teaches a lot of rules. But funnily enough, he wasn't even able to apply the rules, or rather, when he tried to apply the rules, it sounded correct to him. So this was a very, very big revelation about his process, and it kind of confirmed our understanding that the 78% percentile that he got on SC probably did not reflect his true abilities. He was just using instinct and rules. He wasn't really using anything beyond that. And which is why probably his CR and RC was suffering as well. So,
And this is
Piyush,
something
over
which
to
is
you.
very, very, very important for a person to focus on, because unless you understand the root cause, trust me, like you can probably do everything possible. And in fact, it was not like Rishabh was not working on his approach. Like he had practice for about couple of months after taking the GMAT 670 attempt, and he was still at that 670 score at that after 2 months of practice also. So if you don't do this root cause analysis, now whether you work with GMATWhiz or you work with someone else, whether you work with us or not, doesn't matter. But wherever you're working, you need to identify exactly what your root cause is. And that's why I've spent so much, I and ma'am have spent so much time on showing you the questions, showing you the clip, because we want you to understand the importance of it. And this is when we are able to understand that the actual problem for Rishabh was not with his CR or RC as it was visible initially. The problem was that he was not focusing on the context. And if you do not understand the context well in verbal, you are blindfolded. Trust me. Like it's like you are the best driver. You know how to drive your car really well. You're a great driver, but it's a rainy day and you're driving a car and your wipers are not working basically. So you are driving on a road where you can't see what is lying ahead of you. Or you just are able to see the rain is very heavy, it is drenching, you're able to see the partial views and you're driving based on that. So it's just like that if you're not understanding the context. And that's when we felt that we need to work on the context part a lot more. And again, when I say we, it was all ma'am's job, but like I'm using that plural pronoun over here. And what we decided was that first 10 days he has to work on SC. Now, to anyone else like who is watching this session and who knows that Rishabh was at a 75 plus percentile in SC and he was weak in CR and RC, this might seem like suicide, right? His problem was CR and RC, and he's planning to take the test in 30 days. And the first 10 days, we are asking him to work on SC. Think about it. Just give a moment to let that thought sink in. And please tell me in the chat how many of you could have imagined us giving you this kind of an advice if you came to us with those scores. Just a quick yes no will help. Like I'll just like to see how many of you think in that way. So we asked you to actually work on sentence correction for the first 10 days. And the reason why we did that is because in sentence correction, you have small sentences to focus on. So you can probably do more breaking, do more pausing, and you can check whether you're understanding the context or not. Right, ma'am? That's the main intent why we asked them to go through SC initially, like him to go
Absolutely.
through
If
SC.
you can't understand the meaning of a single sentence, then how do you expect yourself to be able to connect two or more sentences, as happens in CR and then in RC? If you are not able to understand the meaning of a single sentence. So it was very, very important that he focus on building his understanding of the way he read the sentence and the information that he drew from a sentence, so that when he
Exactly.
proceeded to CR, he would be able to use that skill in the CR questions. When he's reading through the CR stimulus, he's going through the options, he should be able to break down those sentences and read in one shot, in a single flow without repeatedly reading it, and be able to improve his scores on CR. In fact, his CR and RC were actually, I kind of felt that that's the reason he was suffering there also. He must be reading it just for the sake of reading it, not really drawing any inferences. And later on down the session today, we'll see how to draw those inferences when we talk about the others. Very, very
We can
important
have case
skill.
studies for CR and RCs also. So like
Yes,
we have taken different case studies for those two.
absolutely.
And
So,
as ma'am said, he hardly spent. I remember, ma'am, when I was taking his success story interview, which I'm gonna give the link to the batch of students as well. If you want to check out his entire interview, you can check it out using this link. So it's a very detailed interview where he covers more things that we have covered today, because we're just trying to do it in brief over here. But in that, he says that he hardly spent a couple of days for RC, which was his weakest area as per his marks that he was taking.
yeah.
So his entire effort on SC and CR alone was sufficient for him to improve his RC skills. And that's how he planned his 30-day journey. He was able to get it done in 20 days because he was getting good scores on marks, and we felt comfortable with his skills as well in the sessions that we were having. So that was his broad action plan that we suggested him. And in his execution, obviously, I'll request ma'am, you take up this part because you were working with him on the execution part. So how did you go about the various sessions, and what were the assignments that you used to give him? Yeah.
Right, Ankush, thank you. So the way private tutoring works, and of course you also have to have access to the course, is I tell the student to, in fact, in this case, I'm going to talk about Rishabh only. So I would tell Rishabh, okay, Rishabh, this is what you need to cover before our assignment, our session. So the entire approach is assignment based. Depending on what I have analyzed about his progress in the current session, I tell him what to do before the next session. All right. So in between sessions, there's a very, very structured, very step by step, let's say, building of your skills. So in this case, for SC, as we've already said, that the first 10 days, we would have a session almost every alternate day. And I would tell him exactly what to do in between the two sessions. All right. The assignments would be set. And once we cross that part, like let's say, for example, I would tell him to take small quizzes, short quizzes between the first session, using my feedback in that session and applying it on those quizzes, and then taking, another quiz. And then I would go through his data before the session to understand what he was doing. And then after understanding the data, I would kind of bring up questions in the session again to see how he was working on the approach. Was his approach correct? Were there any conceptual gaps? And session by session, we kept ironing out all those creases, the creases of conceptual gap, the creases of approach, primarily the approach. And then he would be taking a mock test every week. So it was sessions, practice quizzes, sessions, practice quizzes, sessions, and then a mock. And we would see from a mock to a mock how he was making progress and what were the things that still needed to be taken care of before the next mock. And that is how it would proceed. That was how we executed whatever we drew out for him. All right.
So the idea is that he did not have to. He was on a very, very short timeline, like 20, 25, 30 days, whatever.
Yes.
And we had to kind of personalize the entire learning curve. We did not want him to start from scratch. So we gave him focused work between the sessions, and we are glad that we are able to get that achievement done. Like I don't know if you are.
If we have more time with students, like this is a very customized plan of action and a very customized way of executing the plan. And this is a specialty. I think that GMATWhiz, we pay attention to each and every student, what he or she needs. We cannot just give you a blanket guideline. Oh, go and do this. Just solve so many OG questions and be done with it. It doesn't work that way. You will have your own errors, your own weak areas. It could be a very, very small thing. And if you don't work on that, whatever else you might do won't work. So this is how we executed Rishabh's the plan of action that we prepared for him.
And we are really, really proud that we were able to get him across the line. He always was a very diligent student, putting the effort in the right direction, followed all the advice to the T, and did not unnecessarily question. Questioning is fine, but he trusted the advice that was given to him. And that was something which helped him eventually convert INSEAD and I know many of you would have been targeting NCR, and for them, like Rishabh was just exactly at this place about a year back, and today he is actually sitting in NCR and studying among those students. So that really, really gives us joy when we think about it. Yeah.
So I
So
think
yeah.
over to
So
you.
so in case you need some help with your preparation, GMATWhiz team can also help you. We generally get on a call with students initially to kind of get to know about your background. The first step which I was telling you about, where we look at the various factors which are mentioned on the screen. So in case you want to connect with me to understand how the GMATWhiz team can help you improve your score, you can actually schedule a call on my calendar. This call is going to be a free consultation call, and in this call, we'll help you understand how the GMAT team can actually get you across the line, and how do you work on your action plan, how do you create an action plan working with us. So this is a link. In case anyone is interested, they can actually schedule a call using this link with me. So now moving on to the next student, the next case study, Nandini. Again, an amazing case study, something which I'm really, really proud of, because this is something which happens very rarely. First of all, most of the students, if they don't get to their target score in 3 or 4 attempts, they call it a day. I don't think I don't have a metric in front of me, but if I have to guess, less than 1% of all retakers who have taken 2 or more attempts on GMAT will probably go to the level of going till the last attempt, to pushing themselves to the last attempt. I guess, ma'am, we had about 2 students till now, Vasu and
Yes,
Nandini,
yes,
basically, who were
my
in this
right.
case. And right now, we are working with Tomohiro, who is in a similar boat.
Also,
He is
yeah,
a
this is the
new
same.
student. Yes. So very, very rare cases we get like this. And this girl at that point of time when she came to us, again, we talk about all these 4 steps. So she had been preparing for GMAT for 2.5 years. She had given her everything for GMAT, like all the effort. She was a working professional, and with that, she had done almost every single thing that you can think of. I've just mentioned some of the material that she used basically for her prep. And it was not just online courses. She had actually used multiple private tutors as well, not just one, multiple private tutors for her attempts. And in all the 7 attempts combined, she was actually able to get a highest score of just a 680 in all the 7 attempts combined. And then we had only one attempt left for GMAT. Now, why am I focusing on this part? Because trust me, guys, let me ask, how many of you over here have taken 2 or more attempts at GMAT? And if you have, tell us about your score. So I think Gaizun was one person who mentioned initially that he had taken 6 attempts. How many of you, anyone else who had taken 2 or more attempts at GMAT? Now, once you take 2 or more attempts and you fail on those 2, 3 attempts, you start questioning your own capabilities. The more, like, one of the biggest issue that you have to overcome is anxiety. You have to get rid of that to actually do well on the GMAT. And that was a very, very big issue with Nandini. Now, when we sat with her for the root cause analysis, again, with her, SC was the highest. CR and RC were particularly weak for her. Like, if I remember correctly, in CR and RC, she was scoring below 70 percentile. In the highest, best attempt, she actually scored better in CR and RC. But in general, when we look at all her attempts and the inferences that she shared with us, RC, specifically inference type questions, was a big worry for her. And qualitatively, we asked her, then that's why we, instead of asking her to actually work on sentence correction first, we actually, in the diagnosis session, we did RC with her. So we asked her to solve a RC question to see how she reads the information. So what ma'am is going to do now is we are going to actually give you a question, of RC question to solve, the same passage that was given to her to solve, basically. So this is a passage which is in front of you. You go through this passage first, then we are going to give you a question that you will need to solve from this passage, which will come to next. But right now, I'm giving you just 2 minutes, 2.5, maybe 3 minutes max to read this passage yourself. And after you read this passage, we'll give you that question to solve. But our objective is not to solve that question with you. Our objective is to help you understand how did we identify the root cause of the problem that Nandini was facing. So, ma'am will solve the question after, like, not the questions, ma'am will read the passage, how Nandini read it, instead of showing you another video, because that will be very long and we don't have that much time with us. So Ma'am will read the passage as Nandini read it, and then she will show what she was not doing when she was reading the passage. That is something which will help you in understanding and relating what is the mistake that many people do when they do answers. Okay, so all the best. I'm gonna give you 2 minutes to just read the passage, maybe. And now I think we will skip the question because I think we're running short of time. So let's skip the
Right,
question.
fair enough.
Let's let them
Absolutely.
just read the passage and then share the analysis together. Okay, so I'm gonna be on mute for the next 2 3 minutes, guys. You have your time to read the passage. All right, I think I've given 3 minutes already for the passage. So I think, ma'am, we can now start. So what
Yeah.
we'll do is basically read as Nandini and I will show you what she has not read. Over to you, ma'am. Yeah.
So I'm just going to quickly show you how Nandini read it first and then give pointers. So she started reading that Jacob Burckhardt's view that Renaissance European women stood on a footing of perfect equality with Renaissance men has been repeatedly cited by feminist scholars as a prelude to their presentation of rich historical evidence of women's inequality. And then she stopped, and for some reason, she kind of again went back to the right at the beginning of the sentence and like, so Jacob Burckhardt's view that Renaissance European women stood okay with Renaissance men cited as feminist scholars, evidence of women's inequality. So you can see that she read the first sentence in the first instance in one monologue that would have taken at least about 10 seconds, 10, 15 seconds. And then because obviously she didn't understand anything, she went back and kind of picked on certain words, Burkhardt's view and perfect equality and Renaissance men and feminist scholars. She was just picking on those words. And then she went to the second sentence without any more ado. In striking contrast to Burkhardt, Joan Kelly, in her famous 1977 essay, Did Women Have a Renaissance? Argued that the Renaissance was a period of economic and social decline for women, relative both to Renaissance men and to medieval women. And then again, she went back to the starting of the second sentence and she's like, contrast Burkhardt, Renaissance period of decline, Renaissance men, relative Renaissance men, and to medieval women. Okay, okay. Recently, however, a significant trend, and again, she makes no connections whatsoever between the first sentence and the second and the third. A significant trend among feminist scholars has entailed a rejection of both Kelly's dark vision of the Renaissance and Burkhardt's rosy one. Many recent works by these scholars. So now, when she's moving towards the end of the paragraph, she's even not even rereading the sentences. Okay, she's in a rush to finish it off. All right. So many recent works by these scholars stress the ways in which differences among Renaissance women, especially in terms of social status and religion, work to complicate the kind of generalizations both Burkhardt and Kelly made on the basis of their observations about upper class Italian women. And I'm like, she finished reading it and like she would literally give off this sigh like this. And I was like, okay, Nandini, what did you understand? And she's like looking at me blankly and saying, I don't know, it was something about the Renaissance and women's equality and Jacob Burckhart's view and I don't know, feminists. This is what she had to say after reading the paragraph. And then, of course, when I presented her with the question, she was clueless. She picked the choice, which had some familiar words, familiar words from the passage and familiar ideas, what we at GMAT was called half truths and distortions. And she said this is the correct answer. That also, after she went back and reread some portions, skipped and hopped and scanned. That is the way she read. And is that the way you should read? The point is that, all right. So what we understood from her reading was that she was focusing on reading, just picking words here and there, just reading the sentences for the sake of reading. And when it came to picking answer choices, she was focusing on familiar words in the answer choices, versus what she should have done in the first place was understand the text clearly without worrying about the time. She was so worried about the time that she actually, when she solved the question, she took almost 2.5 minutes for the question and still got it wrong. So the point is, it's an irony. She didn't really save much time, right? So before I suggest the plan of action, let me take you back to showing how this should have been read. GMATWhiz is probably the only one institute which talks about this involved and evolved reading. I'm going to show you how, what she should have focused to have got a decent understanding of this passage so that she could have answered all questions without having to go back to the passage or wasting so much time. So here I go. I want you guys to see where I pause, what I kind of make note of, all right? Jacob Burckhart's view. So I tell myself, all right, we're talking about somebody called JB's view. And what was that view? That view is being stated here. The Renaissance European women, I'm going to call them the R women for the sake of kind of remembering easily. The R women, all right, stood on a footing of perfect equality with Renaissance men. All right, so this is his view, that Renaissance women equal to Renaissance men. All right. So this view has been repeatedly cited. And you see, I'm using my sentence correction skills here, guys. Okay. I'm trying to understand the skeleton of my sentence. So this view that Renaissance women and Renaissance men were equal has been cited by feminist scholars as a prelude. Suppose I don't know the meaning of the word prelude. Okay. What do I do? Should I panic? No. At GMATWhiz, we tell you what to do. Look out for context. So these feminist scholars used his view, okay, as something to their presentation of rich historical evidence of women's inequality. Okay, so feminist scholars, they were giving presentation of women's inequality, and funnily enough, they were citing somebody who believed women were equal. And right at this moment in my mind, I'm saying, okay, so I have understood the what of this sentence, the crux, and the crux is there is a paradox here. All right. Who is saying it? The author is telling us this, and the author is talking about the JB and the feminist scholars. And why is it being said? I'm clueless. I'm clueless why the author is giving us this paradox here. Let's move ahead. But crux of this sentence is that the feminist scholars who believed women were, unequal, they were quoting JB's view, which was all about equality for these women. All right. In striking contrast, and now when I'm moving between one sentence and the other, I always draw my connections. In striking contrast to what? It has to be in striking contrast to something mentioned in the previous sentence. And in the previous sentence, I have two things mentioned: JB's view, feminists' view. So I don't know the contrast is about which view. Let me read ahead. In striking contrast to Burckhardt. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a contrast to JB's view. Joan Kelly. Okay, so I've got now another view, JK. In her famous essay, so this is the title of her essay. Okay, so JK argued, this is the verb, that, what did she argue? What is her view? Her view starts here. Renaissance period of economic and social decline for women relative to both Renaissance men and even to women before these Renaissance women, the medieval women. So now here I stop and I draw the connection between the first sentence and the second sentence. So first sentence, JB's view, women equal, men equal. All right, women equal to men. JK's view, women actually worse off. And this is the contrast being presented here. And in the midst of all of this, I have the feminist scholars who don't agree with JB. I'm asking myself, do they agree with JK then? Let me read ahead. And right now, I am also thinking in my mind, okay, why has the author given us all this information? Perhaps the author wants to tell us what really was true about these Renaissance women. Okay, let's read on. Recently, however, now again, I'm noting the transition word, which Nandini wasn't doing at all. So she wasn't focusing on the what, who, and the why. She wasn't focusing on these transition words. She wasn't drawing any connection between these sentences whatsoever. Therefore, she just had a very vague understanding. A significant trend among feminist scholars. Okay, so however, in contrast to JK, in contrast to JB, let's see, trend among feminist scholars has entailed a rejection of both Kelly's vision and Buckhart's vision. Okay, so now I have it. JB believed women were equal to the Renaissance men, Renaissance women equal to Renaissance men. Kelly was women were worse off, and feminist scholars believe both were wrong. Okay, now I have my picture clear. Let's see what will the author give me more about this. Many recent works by these scholars, which scholars? Okay, I'm talking about the feminist scholars. So the author probably is going to support this point, this point here, how they rejected. All right. And this I have learned to do because I'm using my sentence correction skills and I'm also using my CR inference skills. Okay, I'm inferring as I'm reading along. Many recent works by these scholars stress the ways in which differences among Renaissance women, and for the moment, I'm going to ignore this part. This is additional information. I'll come back to it. It doesn't mean I won't read it, but I'm not going to break the flow of my sentence. So works by these feminist scholars stress differences among Renaissance women, work to complicate the kind of generalizations both Buckhart and Kelly made. Okay, so we already know from the previous sentence that the feminist scholars are rejecting both JK and Buckhart's view. Here we are being told why these feminist scholars rejected, because they believed that Buckhart and Kelly kind of made certain generalizations, and that was because their observations were made only about a certain category of women. They hadn't studied a wide category. And now I go back, they hadn't taken into account social status and religion. They hadn't taken those different factors into account, and they had generalized, and therefore the feminist scholars rejected both the views. So I'm kind of, if I had to summarize this before I moved on, I would say this paragraph talks about how the feminist scholars reject, okay, both JB's and JK's views on our women equality. And I might just kind of think to myself, it is because of the generalizations. And that's it. And this kind of understanding, when you have, I'm sure any question that you're offered, you're going to be able to answer smoothly. So this is something that Nandini was not doing at all. And I had a very, very clear idea that she wasn't doing it for her other areas as well. Although I hadn't seen her SC in action, I hadn't seen her CR in action, but I could form a pretty good impression of what she might have been doing. And based on that, okay, I decided, all right, she is not looking at the text properly. She's not understanding the meaning. She's just reading it for the sake of reading it. So the plan of action suggested to her for the first week was, don't worry about time. You cannot look at your watch and learn to drive. You'll be looking ahead. You'll be looking at the road. You can't keep one eye on your watch and one hand on the steering wheel and one eye on the road. You have to focus on the road and the steering wheel. So we told her to focus only on developing her reading skills without worrying about the time limit. Okay, to get the skill right, it has to become intuitive for you to read like this, right? Because she wasn't reading like this. So she spent that week on developing her skills, and at the end of the week we had a session to understand, was she really being able to, or correctly being able to, implement those skills. And when we saw that yes she was, then I asked her, okay, now that you have a very, very good it's become a part of your habit to read this way, now see where you can cut corners in terms of saving time. Maybe you are still rereading sentences multiple times, or maybe you are still not focusing on the meaning in some cases, and therefore maybe you have to go back. So see where you're taking more time. Okay, maintain an error log to see what kind of mistakes you are making. And this is what she did for her RC, and that had to continue throughout her prep up to the actual exam. Week 3, I asked her, look, this is what you've understood about the RC, and now that you're confident, fairly confident on that, you should also pick up your CR and SC. In fact, this was a little backtracking. Usually we start with SC, then CR, and then use those two skills in RC. But in her case, because she was so anxious, we started with that because we know that RC takes time to develop. All right. And then she started using her RC skills in CR. Her sentence reading skills that she'd been focusing on in reading RC paragraphs, she now started using in SC as well. All right. And then from week 4 onwards, we start focusing on the small quizzes and the marks, much like we did for Rishabh at that point onwards. So I think over to you, Yush, or we can talk about a little
Ma'am,
more
we
about
have
this.
the execution, huh? We have the
Uh-huh.
execution part where how, like, we'll now tell you basically, ma'am will now share what exactly was she doing in her execution, basically, of all this plan of action.
Right. So she was working a little on SC to understand the pause points for each sentence. Again, this is something that we'd already discussed with her during the first session. And we've already said that to develop the right reading skills, to constantly ask those 3 questions about what is being said in the sentence, who is saying it, why is it being said, draw the connections, and move on. And I also suggested to her, because she was so paranoid, so anxious about whenever she saw that text up on the screen, I did suggest her to read certain articles which covered various topics so that she would be comfortable around them. All right. And this does help, guys. Okay. Not all of us are like avid readers. You don't have to be avid readers. The idea is you should be comfortable around reading diverse topics. So we suggested sources such as New York Times, Harvard Business Review, aldaily.com, sciencedaily.com, oxfordeye.com to go up on the American history, and so on and so forth. And then for her, what was very, very important was consistency and regularity. So 3 passages daily without the time limit, and maintaining the error log, as we've discussed already. And then once that part was covered, once her error log became shorter and shorter, started working on CR and SC later. What was very important in her case, because this was something she constantly spoke about, that she was always anxious, and not so anxious while she was, say, giving her mocks or the quizzes, but very anxious. She used to get very anxious when she was in the exam. She'd taken it 7 times, so she could actually tell me about each of those. And I said, look, although it might sound cliched, but meditation does help with your focus. Okay, this is something that no amount of skill development and all is going to just take care of. This is something that you have to take care of. So you have to calm down, you have to deliberate, you have to kind of uh, understand the stillness. And during the exam, if you feel that rush of anxiety, take a strategic pause, close your eyes for 10 seconds, just block out everything. I know a lot of you might not agree with this, but trust me, it's better to kind of zoom out for those 10 seconds instead of go on reading and then realize you've understood nothing and then panic and come back again, and then, or even worse, panic and go ahead without understanding. So take those strategic pauses, those 5 seconds, 10-second pauses to get back into the game and work that way. So this actually helped her. This really helped her.
And in fact, this is very, very critical because when you are someone who has taken 7 attempts on the GMAT, as an expert, we were also aware that anything can go wrong on the day of the test because your all those 7 attempts that you have taken can come to haunt you on that day. Those thoughts can haunt you on that day. And you kind of see every single time your score starting with a 6 and not with a 7, that can actually play a very, very big role in your mind. And even if you are prepared, completely prepared, you can still mess it up. So this was a very important part of the advice that we gave her. And meditation along with strategic pauses. Those of you who want to understand the importance of strategic pauses and the other testing strategy related advice, you can also check out this webinar recording that we have done on testing strategy. So what I wanted to say is that when we were working with these students, we were trying to understand their individual use cases, not just giving them some random advice that we felt was right, but how were they different from the others? And you can see a very different plan of action for both these students who work with us. And I'm really, really proud, especially for Nandini, because she actually had a very, very tough journey with GMAT. And I'm really happy. I think she went to ISB right now. Nandini
Yes,
studied
yes,
ISB, right?
yes.
So she has I think this year she has completed her MBA as well. So she was able to get into ISB virtue of this, and we're really, really happy to have played a part in that journey. So with that, let's move on to the next student, Tushar, right? The last case study that we're going to take up today. I actually can't take for four. Wanted to discuss a bonus case study of GMAT as well, which is what we have written in our, let's say the link which is there in the comment, sorry, description in the chat. But will not be able to take up GMAT's case study. In fact, Tushar's case study also we might not be able to cover as much in depth as we wanted to because we're
Right.
already running behind time. So I'm just sharing with Tushar's interview link as well. Those of you who want to check out his entire story, you can check it out over here. We have conducted his interview as well. But yeah, please feel free to ask us any questions. I don't see anyone asking any questions. Either we are doing a very good job, we are answering all your questions preemptively, or we are doing a very bad job at doing this. So I'm not sure why you guys are not asking the question. I hope it's not the latter because that's generally not the case. But yeah, do feel free to ask us any questions. We have tried to cover different use cases. If you belong in any of these use cases and you have a question to ask which we have not covered as a part of our discussion, please feel free to ask us. This is an open question. I wanted to play the role of a moderator. You guys have not given me the chance to play the role of a moderator till now. But anyway, I'll continue proceeding. You can post your questions and I'll take them up as required. So what about Rishabh? Now, this guy came to GMATWhiz. I think that time he had done one online course already. I don't remember which one exactly, but he had done some online courses and he was like aiming for a higher score, a 750 to be precise, basically. So he kind of came to us at that stage. And in that point of time, like he used our online course. So I'm focusing on the second part where ma'am basically came into picture. So he used our online course, he went through our course material and he was able to score a 720 using our course material properly. Okay, so at that point of time, he was almost good with the approach. So it was not like his approach was completely wrong, but there was a little bit of fine tuning which was needed in that. And his data basically showed basically that he's actually struggling with CR. And he also felt that he also told us that in CR is where he feels the least confident when it comes to solving questions. So we thought with him it is important to kind of understand where is he going wrong. So he was working with Shreyas, who was his mentor, but he took up a couple of sessions focused on CR with Sunita, where he focused on CR solving question solving skills. Okay, so we are gonna go to that. So Abhay, if you want to book a call with me, you can use this link. Basically, I'll just share this link. Anyone who wants to schedule a call to understand how the GMAT team can help them in improving their scores, you can basically schedule a call using this link. Okay, it's there in the chat. So over to you, ma'am. I think we can
Yeah,
we
sure.
can
Let me
solve.
get started with this.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
as we've already discussed the other two cases, in this case also the data was saying something. He was also saying the same thing in this case, and even I had a chat with his mentors and understood where he was going, the direction he was going in. So again, I got him to solve a CR question in front of me to understand what was it that he was doing wrong. Even at a 720, there was something that he was not doing right. I mean, there were some things that he was doing right, but some things that he was not doing right, and which is why he was not being able to scale the score higher. So we gave him a question to solve. Here's the question. I think we can give. Do we have time, Piyush, to give students a shot at this question?
yes, we can. I think let's target about 10 minutes max in solving the question
Okay.
combined. So let's try to see that. You can do that.
Or should we say just straight away? I think we should give a chance for students to read,
Yeah,
otherwise they
let's.
won't be able to relate.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
yeah, let's let them solve it. Yeah. So we'll mute ourselves so that we can focus on the question. We'll mute ourselves and we'll give you about 2.5 minutes to solve this question. So all the best. Guys. So it's more than 2 minutes that you have seen the question. Those of you who have solved this can actually share your answers in the chat now. Basically. We'll give another 30 seconds for others to solve it. In the meantime, you can share your answers in the chat.
We start getting some answers. Thank you, Pradeep.
Just see that one person has probably solved it.
Yeah.
But I think now we should get started with the solution because we are anyway running behind
Yeah,
time. Just having
in fact, I'm going to cut corners a little bit. I'm sure all of you have read the paragraph and have already know what the question is about. I'm going to straight off head to what Tushar picked. Any guesses, guys? I mean, guesses means what have you picked? Only one of you have shared has shared your answer with us. It would be wonderful to get a few more answers to kind of build the context, guys. Thank you, Simran. Thank you, guys, for sharing that. So D E. Let's okay. Let me get started. So Tushar read this. In fact, something that we forgot to mention on our analysis is Tushar was finding the weekend questions a bit of a bother. For some reason. And because weekend questions form a very big majority of your CR, it was very important that he get that right. And he did not, he had no idea what he was missing on. All right. Thank you, Yashraj. So we've got three answers here D, E, C. But actually, Tushar landed up choosing choice B. Yes, guys. He chose B. And why he chose B, what could have gone wrong for him, starts very simply at analyzing the passage. So if you go through the passage, if all of you have gone through the passage, you'll realize that we're talking about certain drugs which aren't going into trial because there is a shortage of people willing to undergo the trials, to take part of the trials, to show that the drugs are safe and effective. So which means that we don't know currently that the drugs are safe and effective. And then the author is also telling us that future generations, the lives and health of those future generations may depend on the treatments that are currently experimental. And finally, the conclusion, physicians morally wrong. Okay, that's the conclusion. When, in the absence of any treatment proven to be effective, they fail to encourage suitable patients to volunteer for clinical trials. Now, here the conclusion was physicians are morally wrong. And why are they morally wrong? They do not ask current patients to agree to trials of new drugs. This was the conclusion. And what we needed to do was to prove, since it was a weekend question, we had to prove that physicians are not morally wrong. Okay, even if they do not ask current patients to agree to trials of new drugs. All right, and therefore the scope of the conclusion, again something that we kind of focus on at GMATWhiz, is we are looking for any new information that says physicians not morally wrong. They're not morally wrong for not asking current patients. Okay, not asking current patients to agree to trials does not make them morally wrong. This is what we had to prove. But if you see choice B, okay, which is what Tushar chose, talks about patients. It doesn't even talk about physicians. It says patients do not share the physician's professional concern for public health, but everyone means patients included, has a moral obligation, right? So this choice is saying patients are morally wrong. And did we have to prove patients are morally wrong? No. But look at this. This is actually showing that patients are morally wrong. All right. And somehow Tushar thought that this was weakening the conclusion that physicians are morally wrong. Now, when I put it to you like this, you can see it clearly. But why was Tushar not able to see this? Why wasn't he able to not see this? Because he had not used the correct process. He had not focused on the conclusion. What was the conclusion? Physicians are morally wrong. Why are they wrong? Because they are not asking the current patients. Okay, they are not asking the current patients to agree to trials. And therefore, we had to prove that they were not morally wrong in not asking current patients. Why? Then that why we had to choose from the options. That they were not morally wrong because they couldn't sacrifice their current patients to undergo some experimental stuff which might not be safe for them, and which makes the correct answer as E. Some of you have chosen that physicians have overriding means most or uppermost duty. Okay, they have an overriding moral and legal duty to care for the health and safety of their current patients. This talks about general everybody, including patients today, tomorrow, yesterday, day after, future, everybody. And probably this everyone, this current, is something that kind of Tushar totally missed out. He was not focusing on the conclusion, he was not focusing on the scope, and he landed up choosing an option which is not even remotely connected to the physicians being or not being morally wrong. So the correct answer here was E, because it says that physicians have to take care of their current patients, and there's nothing wrong if they are not sacrificing their current patients to those trials, which may not be safe. So clearly here we understood that Tushar was not focusing much on the meaning of the answer choice. If he had focused, he would have realized that choice B was not even talking about physicians' morality and immorality, right? And of course, he wasn't because of that, he wasn't even eliminating choices on solid grounds. So there were a lot of other things that I could identify, that the reason why he was not focusing on the answer choice, meaning the reason why he was not even getting to it, was probably he was not focusing on the conclusion as well. And therefore we suggested this plan of action, that first he had to work on reading the stimulus, analyzing the stimulus correctly, much like what I've already shown you in RC. This is what we show for CR as well, that as you read a sentence along, you keep connecting the dots. What, who, why, what is being said? Is it a fact? Is it an opinion? If it's an opinion, whose opinion? Okay, is it in the direction of the main conclusion or not? So working on understanding the stimulus. Okay, and that helped him to improve timing as well for CR, because that was also off. And once he had this stimulus in control, all right, and once he was able to improve his timing on CR, he was supposed to go ahead and take mocks and do exactly the same thing during the mocks, all right. So when we look at this plan of execution, how it kind of panned out was, okay, he initially was working with his mentor Shreyash on initial preparation, and then of course we've already spoken about these. Then when I gave him the feedback, he was analyzing reasons for eliminating incorrect choices, okay, and matching his thought process with our very, very detailed solutions, so that he could identify that if he was going wrong anywhere, or if he was not thinking along the right lines, what was that point, what was that turning point. And then he was taking short CR quizzes from our Whiz quiz, which focused on his weak areas, primarily in this case, the weekend questions, and to some extent, sometimes it's the evaluate questions as well. And apart from this, although he done well with SC and RC, but because we wanted him to, he wanted a really high score, he had to be like really bang on target there. So he was also trying to use whatever he was, using on the CR on the RC as well and SC as well. So I think over to you, Piyush.
Thank you so much. So basically, let's now talk about the like score improvement thing, like overall, what is the approach that one has to follow? So the key crux, if you looked at all three stories, like we tried to tell you about the different cases. I know some of you would have been able to relate to some of these cases. Some of you might be at a score range of less than 670 also, which was the lowest score among all the three cases that we talked about. These all three cases had 670 or higher scores. We helped them achieve much higher scores in either limited time or 8th attempt or something like that. But it could be some of you are below the level of 670, so probably you have more problems that you have to sort out. But at the end of the day, the score improvement approach has to be this simple. You have to first understand basically the root cause. That's where it starts. So when you connect with our team, we first understand your background and we do the root cause analysis, and that's what we do. Now, I'm also sharing the score improvement strategy session, which is about more about the general strategy, not about individual case studies. That if you want to watch, you can watch it using this link. But the idea is you have to first understand what is the root cause that is actually creating trouble for you. Because in most of the cases, people don't understand the root cause. They just try to tackle a symptom. They see their timing is poor, they just focus on improving their timing. They see that, okay, their accuracy is poor, they try to focus on accuracy, or they think that, okay, they're weak in certain topics, they just focus on practicing more questions in those topics. But if you do not understand the root cause, which you saw in many of these cases was not a particular topic in general, but it was the overall approach or the method that they were using. For some people, they were not pausing. For some people, they were pausing, but they were not analyzing. Some people were not focusing on the conclusion. Some people were not focusing on the context. So it could be very different for you from all these people. And then we had multiple other case studies as well who had different problems. But what I'm trying to say is root cause identification is the solution. Because I personally feel at least that problem solving is 90% about identifying the main issue, basically. Because if your root cause is identified and you know what the problem is, solving the problem becomes much easier. And that's why we have tried to focus more on identification of the problem. Then you go to the next stage, which is plan of action. Create a plan of action that can actually help you work on that root cause correctly. And then focused execution is very important. When you're doing the execution, you might have to tweak things a bit as well. Okay, so that's about the overall summary of what needs to be done, what was common in not just these three success stories. We have had over 50 plus students who have done amazing, amazing work like this. We just took out three of the most incredible success stories to talk about today, but this is the common thread that is there. So in case, I just invited Ram to kind of share her inputs with you, and it's not just this small things that we pointed out. It's very important that we work with students who continuously see how they progress as well. Because in many cases, ma'am, like how often does it happen that you give advice to a particular student that you have to start thinking in this fashion, and in the next from the next very session itself, they're able to implement that for every single time. How many times does it happen? You're muted, so if you're speaking, you can't hear you. Let me unmute you. Just You have to
Sorry,
unmute.
my bad.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a rare case that I tell you to do this, and the very next session you're like all there. It doesn't happen like that. It's a constant step by step improvement. They are constantly in touch with us. We keep talking every other day, depending on how long your preparation is going to be. But it has to be a very, very closely monitored approach. It doesn't happen that just one day I tell you and you go ahead and you are able to do everything, you know. Sometimes it happens that I've given you feedback about something, you have improved that, and then something else has gone down. So it's
Because
it
when you
happens.
have taken the GMAT for like multiple times or even a single time, or you have prepared for 6 7 months, there's the bigger problem for you is to unlearn things. It's not just about learning new things. You have those
Yeah.
certain ways of solving questions which are there in your mind, and you
The
have to
baggage is
put those
there. The
out.
baggage takes time to go. I think that is what you were asking. It does take time.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
the thing that Piyush said at the beginning, you have to have an open mind, willing to do it. Acceptance is the first step towards improvement. You don't accept that, okay, this is something I might really be doing wrong, Um,
Exactly.
that if you're not going to accept it, won't work.
And just to be open and frank with all of you, it's not like all the private tutoring students who work with us or all the students who work with GMAT has become successful. Even when I'm having discussions with our prospective students sometimes, I tell them that you have to come with a very, very open mind. Like sometimes you might not like the advice that we are giving you. You might not think that this is the right thing to do. For example, Rishabh could have very well said that, Piyush, you're asking me, or Sunita ma'am, you're asking me to spend 30, 40, 50% of my time on SC, which is my strongest area. Should I be doing that? He could have asked us, or he could have simply ignored that advice. And this is something which some other students have done. Like they have ignored our advices, taken sessions, but they've not seen that improvement. So we are there as a guide who can actually take you in the right direction. But at the end of the day, it's your hard work, which is equally or I think more important than our work, to trust us, to follow that advices and all of that. In fact, very recently, like day before yesterday, when we were discussing about the agenda of the session, we heard from another student of ours, Anil. Again, he improved from a 620 to a 720.
720, yeah. Verbal
It might
25 to verbal 38.
38. It might look like a 100-point improvement, but for him to come from a verbal 25 to 38 was an amazing, amazing,
Amazing journey.
amazing story. Because his verbal was literally poor. He was, I think, from a he was from a vernacular
Yes,
background,
his command over
basically.
the language itself wasn't like you would say, it wasn't like very good. He was, in general, a very slow reader. And being a slow reader, you understand how, when I say slow reader, I'm not talking about the paused reading that we teach. Slow reader, as in he took time to absorb whatever he was reading, whether he was reading it with pauses or without pauses. So for him, it was a really uphill task, but you should. I was amazed at the kind of error log that he was maintaining, Piyush. He was following everything that I would say to the T, like literally to the T. And
Hmm.
if you remember what I told him, he just came out and he's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I could hear you during the exam telling me, look, focus on this. Don't think about this. One of the things that I used to tell him that just because a sentence structure looks awkward, sounds awkward, please don't eliminate it. Okay. And he actually gave me this feedback that out of the 14 SC questions that he got, um, around 5 6 of them were this weird constructions. And that is when he was like, I could hear you telling me, look, just because it's weird, it's not it's not incorrect. And I held on to it. I eliminated the other choices for the right reasons. I found reasons to eliminate them, and then because I was left with that one thing, because the others were all incorrect, and I marked that. And he was, because the best thing was, he was confident. He's saying that I have taken the exam twice, 4 times, I think, before, but
Okay.
I never felt this confident. I may not have a huge score now, but I can't tell you the amazing confidence that I was feeling. So, in fact, he's WhatsApp me today that, do you think,
Yeah,
Sunita,
yeah.
that you can?
I was coming to that part itself. So this guy, just to give you some background, had taken multiple attempts on GMAT, and he had used another course, I think GMAT, for quite some time,
GMAT,
and
yes.
he was at a verbal 25 till that point. Like even after doing all of that effort, so for him to kind of get to a 720 first itself was an uphill task. He probably did not in himself believe that he can get to that. And today he called me like after probably WhatsApping you, we had a discussion also, and he's now aiming for a 740, 750 kind of a score. So that's what like confidence does to you, that you can actually probably get better. So what I'm trying to say is that his effort, his hard work was probably much more important than the guidance that we gave him. So it's
More,
also
more.
about what you do. basically. And it's very, very critical that you focus on that. And that's one of the reasons why private tutoring service is very, very in a lot in demand. And right now, I think we have a slot for about 3 students that we can take up, 3 fresh students. Then the next slots will only open up after around 15-20 days. So in case you want to work with Sunita ma'am for verbal, we have a plan which goes for $750. In that you get access to 10 sessions. Each session is 1.5 hours long. So you get 15 hours of tutoring one-on-one with Sunita ma'am. All the classes will be recorded. You will get the discussions and everything will be personalized for you. You will get access to our verbal online course as well, verbal part of our online course, that means the question bank and the homework that you need to do. And you will have the validity for 4 months. So in case anyone of you is interested in looking at our packages, you can check out the details over there. Okay, so if you have any other questions for me, for ma'am, please feel free to ask me now. I'm formally opening it up for a Q&A. The last time I asked you guys to ask the question that I got was, how do I speak to Piyush? So please ask me any other questions that you might have for me. I'm more than happy to take them up. And in case anyone of you wants to talk to me, you have my WhatsApp number on the screen as well. But the better way to connect with me is to kind of book a time on my like calendar, because generally like a lot of my call slots are booked by other students. So that's the best way to reach out to me. I'm just giving you the link again for doing that. You can't directly speak to ma'am because I am the gatekeeper over there. So you have to connect with me first in order to connect with her. But I'm pretty sure that if you choose to work with us, or even if you don't choose to work with us, if you follow the advices that we have done given in this session and the one session before that, you'll actually see a great improvement in your GMAT scores. And what keeps us driving, at least like at GMATWhiz, ma'am, me, and all the other people in GMATWhiz, is the success that we deliver to students, because
True.
we have been students ourselves. We have seen people struggling. I was a student of Sunita ma'am. I remember attending her class long back and then asking her how to improve my verbal score. And we have been strugglers. So we understand the pain that a student goes through. And when we see that student getting to their outcome, like it really like gives us the confidence. It really gives us that pleasure, because we feel that's the best thing that we can probably do to any student, basically. So that's what drives us. So feel free to reach out to us if you have any other questions related to your GMAT preparation. We are more than happy to help you out with that. Okay. So I still don't see any question, ma'am. So I think you have done a good job.
I think you've answered all the questions and everything that could have been asked, hopefully.
But
So
yeah,
this
this
was a
was a
good
nice
session.
session.
Yeah.
Yeah, very different session from what we usually do. We do a monologue
Yes,
of
usually, yes,
strategies and all.
exactly. It was good to have somebody else, kind of taking over the reins from time to time. Yes.
Good. So all the best, guys. It was great having you with us. In case you want to reach out to us, you have those details on the screen. And do give this video a like and a thumbs up and share it with your friends if you found this helpful. So all the best for your
All the
GMAT
very
lab.
best,
This is
guys. Yes. All
Piyush
the
and
very
Sunita
best.
from GMAT. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.